I had a job talk at the University of California, Riverside when I was right after I finished my PhD, and now, as I say, I'm in educational psychology, more on the psychology side, mostly stats. One of the big names in our field was Bob Rosenthal. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Bob Rosenthal. If you're in psychology, you definitely have. He was at Harvard for years and years, and I had referenced him a number of times in my thesis. And I gave my job talk, and there was probably about twice as many people. That's a scary thing. Your job talk is when you go in and they interview you for the morning, and then you have lunch with them, and then you meet with faculty, and then you meet with the dean, and then they set you up and advertise your job talk, which is basically usually your research from your dissertation. So you stand up there and you explain it. Now, you know this better than anybody else in the room, but it's still nerve-wracking. There were a lot of people in that room, and this was very complex statistical modeling stuff that I was doing. So come on in. I'd gone through this whole process and looked at and got through it. It was the first job talk I had done. And it couldn't be, I was in Calgary, it couldn't be in Lethbridge. It had to be at the University of California, Riverside. And when it was over, this very distinguished gentleman standing in the back of the room asked me a couple of really good questions that I was happy were asked because it showed that somebody actually understood this. And I blessedly was able to answer them. And he came up afterward and said, "That was very interesting. I'd really like to talk to you more about this. My name's Bob Rosenthal. I used to be at Harvard, but now I'm here on semi-retirement, and they've been kind enough to give me an emeritus position." And I can still, I can just still see myself standing like that. And talked to him for a while, and away he went. And I said to the fellow who was the head of the search committee, who was walking me around afterward, "Thank God you did not tell me that Bob Rosenthal was going to be in that room when I did that presentation, because he said, "No, I know. I knew, and I didn't say anything to you." But that's sort of the excitement and of course the answer is I ended up not there, but at another university that's not Carleton in Ottawa. Which is another whole long life story that we won't get into today. But, the bottom line is you are there and you are very actively in the field. So these are some of the advantages that are to you and to your department. Let's talk about the disadvantages for a minute. Here's the problem with all those wonderful things. Your youth and energy will allow you to be the focus of a number of people's generosity as far as wanting to allow you the wonderful opportunity for the first time to sit on committees and to engage in, as my little story at the beginning told, their research and to collaborate. And if you do go into a relatively small department where there are people who just aren't hired, it's like you're the new guy on the block now, and it's amazing how much respect they will have for you in order to pile a lot of things on you. And you're new and you can only take too many of them. Same with the tech savvy. If you're the only one in the department who knows how to set up exams on WebCT, then you may find yourself spending a lot of time with the other faculty members and bonding over relatively technical things. The idealism bit, again, it's a good thing, but often it's quite quickly dashed because all of those things that you've seen over the years that you thought, if I was a professor, I wouldn't do that. Or I'm really going to try not to. You won't do some of them, and it's learning on the ground, and it's a wonderful thing. But you know what? In reality, a lot of those things there's a reason for. You just didn't know what it was yet. And that idealism to make things better is a good thing, and it's what will move you forward, and it's what lets you enrich the academic environment coming in new. But it's also what can absolutely exhaust you and make you feel like a failure along the way. So you need, more than anything else, to carry with you an open mind. I'll give you just a really easy example. A friend of mine, who I didn't know through academia, but our kids played hockey together, had gotten a job as it was a continuing ed course at a university, and it was a course on short stories. And she was really excited because she was teaching for the first time, and she had an English degree. And she went in and was so excited about this, and she said, the one thing I always hated, she had 30, 40, I think, people in this class. She was all excited. She's teaching for the first time. She's talked to me about it. One of the things she always hated was when a professor in an English course would say, okay, I'd like you to do an analysis of a short story. Pick one of these 6. Because she didn't think that was right. She thought people should have the freedom to choose whichever short story they wanted. And so she was going to correct this. So she did. And she walked in one day to the rink, looking extremely depressed with this pile like this in her hand. And she said, "I can't believe I've done this." And the question was, what did you do? Well, of course, what was her problem at that point? What did she now have to do?
Read
40 short stories, because they all picked whatever they wanted, and I think she'd said she'd read 10 of them. And all of the and it's we'll see this with, I don't want to pick on English professors, but they probably explode the ground out under themselves more than anybody else. English teachers too, high school English teachers too, is that they want to help their students learn to write better. So they'll set up an assignment with 8 draft submissions before the final. Because we know how you teach people to write, is you keep giving them feedback. So that first year undergraduate class with 180 students and 2 TAs, you ask for 8 draft submissions. And now you do the math about how much pieces of marking. And then the other thing that happens is, if you do take all those drafts in and then you don't give your students feedback, then your students are really not happy with you for that opportunity to do that. Also, the idealism, the other thing it'll get you is, and we're going to talk about this more in detail in a minute, is in your expectations for what you think undergraduate students are capable of. Because you haven't been one for a very long time. And when you were one, I will propose you weren't one of them. Because you're here. Which makes you a bit of an odd animal to begin with. So even when you were in your undergrad, yahooing it up in your first year with your, freshman 15 and all the things that go along with it, you were different than they are. Because what we know is about 7% of our first year undergraduate students will go on to apply for grad school. And then of those, about 3% will go on to attempt PhDs, and about half of those will complete. So in your 350 lecture theater with 350 shining, excited faces in first year, how many of those does that mean will actually get to this level? 3 or 4. And you got to teach them all. So you've got to temper that idealism of how academically focused you have been with the real world. And that takes a while. Mostly that takes a while. Your recent engagement in your academic field, unfortunately, makes you a bit of a geek. And you've been writing, and you've been hanging with all these other grad students. I don't know about you. I spent most of my grad school days reading other people's dissertations and having them read mine and helping, and that's what you do. So you get engaged in a level that is so far above even your average master's course. You don't even know how brilliant you are at this point. But you are. But you really can't tell how brilliant you are. So when you get back down onto the ground with all this recent engagement, it can make you trying to operate at a level of depth that is just completely unrealistic for a first or second or even third year undergraduate course. All of our dream is to go into our first academic job and teach only graduate students and maybe the odd fourth year seminar course where we can let them know about our narrow little field of the development of intelligence according to measurement by the WISC-3 if factor analyzed by a structural equation model. But you know what? Beyond that, there's not a whole lot to it. So that recent engagement is probably the biggest double-edged sword of all. Because you got a ways to go back now. And it really is almost, you can almost picture it physically on a bicycle, pedaling backwards. Because you've really got to move yourself back to a different world.